My name is Sonya, and I am doing this for a 9th grade literature project. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the historical accuracy of Jesus as the Christ. If I told you that the Gospels, or that George Washington wasn't actually the first president of the United States, you would look at me like I'm crazy. Why? Because history supports that George Washington was the first president of the United States. History supports something else too. History supports that Jesus was the Son of God. Let's look at the documentation first. However, before we begin, I would like to make a distinction. We are going to treat the Gospels like any other historical record, which they undeniably are. The Gospels are historical documents, and Jesus was a historical person. The Gospels are, without a doubt, our best source for Jesus. They are, in essence, biographies of his life. And while people say that we can't trust them because they were written 2,000 years ago, we have better attestation and support for the New Testament Gospels than any other document of antiquity. All of the Gospels were written no later than 85 AD. Mark was written as early as 60 AD. This is less than 2 generations away from the death of Jesus. And while people say that big fish stories get bigger, it takes 3 to 4 generations for any legends to develop. The Gospels were written far before this time period, and not only that, but they do not match the style of legend from that era. To put this into perspective, we have 5,000 1st, 2nd, and 3rd century Greek manuscripts. The closest comparison we have to the Gospels is Homer's Iliad, which has 643 manuscripts. The earliest of those manuscripts date nearly 1,000 years after the document was originally written. However, for the Gospels, the manuscripts date all the way back to 125 AD. That's less than 40 years away from when they were originally written. Not only are the Gospels biographies of Jesus' life, but they are eyewitness accounts to what happened. The Gospels of Matthew and John are their own accounts. The Gospel of Mark is essentially Peter's account. And the Gospel of Luke is an accumulation of testimonies specializing in Jesus' miracles. Ancient sources such as Tacitus, Suetonius, Thales, and Josephus all corroborate with what is said in the Gospels. These sources point to the uniqueness of Jesus' life and the way that he impacted culture. This draws us neatly to our second point, which is that Jesus' life was very unique. Let's start with some basics. Jesus was born in 4 to 7 BC. His ministry lasted from 27 BC AD to 30 AD, or 30 to 33 AD, ending with his death in 30 to 33 AD. Jesus was a Palestinian Jew whose occupations were rabbi and carpenter, rabbi being a Jewish teacher. Jesus had some pretty unique differences that set him apart from other people in history. Let's start by comparing Jesus to the culture around him. Jesus was not the first person to claim to be the Messiah, but he was the first person to claim to forgive sins. Now this is an odd statement because it only works if you're the one being offended. Therefore you have something to forgive. However, Jesus saw himself as a principal party being offended in all things. In fact, in some cases we see Jesus being presented with a person who has a physical need. And instead of healing the physical need like we would expect Jesus to, he instead forgives a person's sins. And then to prove he has the authority to do so, he also heals a person's physical need. However, Jesus may not have been the first person to perform miracles and exorcisms, but the way he did it was different than any other person in history. When you look at 1st century magicians and healers, they used prayers and incantations to try and coerce mythical deities or spirits to work on their behalf. Jesus was completely different. He both taught and healed in his own authority. This is odd because the rabbis of this age were taught to teach in the name of somebody else. Rabbi so-and-so says in the name of Rabbi so-and-so. Jesus completely breaks the mold when he says, I tell you. Not my rabbi, but I tell you. So let's back up just a little bit and take a closer look at Jesus' life. Jesus made some pretty audacious claims. He claimed to be the Son of God, the Son of Man, to be fully God, and to be the Messiah. These claims leave us in a very sticky situation because they are either true or false. C.S. Lewis very aptly says, quote, "People often say, I am ready to accept accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I do not accept his claims to be God. This is the one thing we must not say. A man who was merely man and said the sort of things Jesus said would not be a great moral teacher. He would either be a lunatic, on the level with a person who calls himself a poached egg, or he would be the devil of hell. You must make your choice. Either this man is and was the Son of God, or else a madman, or something worse. You can shut him up for a fool, you can spit at him and kill him as a demon, or you can fall at his feet and call him Lord and God. But let us not come with any patronizing nonsense about his being a great human teacher. He did not leave that door open for us, and he did not intend to. End quote. All this is to say that in the end this boils down to a choice. Accept or reject. So let's look at why we should accept Jesus as the Son of God. Besides making some crazy claims, Jesus is portrayed as a doer of mighty deeds. Some people say that the deeds themselves discredit the Gospels because they are unbelievable. However, the fact that Jesus does miracles is exactly what you would expect if Jesus was God incarnate. The Gospels record nearly 40 miracles ranging from mastery over nature to exorcisms to raising of the dead. Nearly all of the miracles were performed publicly so that none could say that Jesus was committing fraud. And while ancient sources may refer to Jesus as a magician, all ancient sources confirm that wherever Jesus went, miraculous things followed. Jesus used these miracles to point to Isaiah 35, which says that when the Lord's salvation comes, the blind will see and the lame will walk. The fact that Jesus is using his miracles to point back to the Old Testament is part of my third point, which says that the Messianic prophecies support Jesus as the Son of God. The Messianic prophecies are a collection of about 100 predictions found in the Old Testament. They were written over a time span of a millennium and completed at least 3 centuries before Jesus' birth. Some people claim that the early church fathers altered the Gospels or the Old Testament to fit with Jesus' life. However, the Jews in that time period were very familiar with these prophecies. In fact, it was not uncommon for the average Jewish man to have the first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized. Some people say that Jesus got lucky in the matter. However, the math speaks for itself. To fulfill 8 of the prophecies is one in 100 million billion. It gets even harder to say it was by chance when you look at a study done by Dr. Peter Stoner, a science and mathematics professor, whose study showed that to fulfill 13 of the prophecies by chance is 1 in 13 trillion. That's 1 in a trillion, 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 trillion. So you can still say it's by chance, but I suggest you don't. Some people say that Jesus orchestrated these prophecies as part of a grand scheme. However, there's so much in Jesus' life that he cannot control. How could he have controlled when he was born, or that his father took him to Egypt when he was a child? How could he have controlled miracles in front of crowds of skeptics? And how could he have arranged for the price of his betrayal? A prearranged betrayal belies the very meaning of the word betrayal. Jesus could not have controlled so many aspects of its life. It's ridiculous to say that he engineered these prophecies. However, in a sense, he does engineer these to fulfill these prophecies. If Jesus was the Son of God, and he was God's salvation for the world, then he had to understand exactly what he was doing. And Jesus was very self-conscious of his life to make sure that it fit exactly the outline that the Messianic prophecies provide. The Messianic prophecies specify exactly who the Messiah can be. The Messiah must be from the lineage of Abraham and of Jacob, Israelite patriarchs. He must be from the line of Judah, a founder of one of the tribes of Israel, and he must be from the line of David, a renowned Jewish king. Both the Gospels of Matthew and Luke contain Jesus' genealogy, which meets the specifications. The Messiah would not come until Judah had lost all powers of self-government. This did not happen until the Roman government took over, and it is within this time frame we see Jesus step onto the stage. David prophesies Jesus' death by crucifixion, and Daniel, a Jewish prophet, gives the exact year in which the Messiah will die. And while there is a time gap in which the historians cannot pinpoint, within this time gap Jesus dies. And the list goes on and on. the Messianic prophecies do support Jesus as the Son of God. The Messianic prophecies also mention the resurrection of the Messiah. That brings me to our last and final point. To understand the validity of the resurrection, we must first understand the nature of Jesus' death. Jesus was handed over to the Romans and flogged 39 times. When he was taken to Golgotha, where the crucifixions took place, he was nailed through his wrists and through his feet. When Jesus was lifted upright on the cross, his shoulders were dislocated. This put him into position to inhale. To exhale, he would have had to push up on his feet, driving the nails between the metatarsals in his feet and or the bones in his feet. Death is caused by asphyxiation, or the inability to breathe. Jesus would have taken each breath until exhaustion wore him out, and he slowed. Then Jesus would have had respiratory acidosis occur. Respiratory acidosis means that his blood was poisoned by the lack of unreleased carbon dioxide. Respiratory acidosis would have eventually caused cardiac arrest. Remember that Jesus was already in critical condition before he ever got on the cross. He was also in hypovolemic shock prior to the cross. Hypovolemic shock is caused by the lack of blood. Due to the hypovolemic shock and the asphyxiation, pericardial and pleural effusion occurred. Pericardial and pleural effusion is when liquid gathers around your heart and your lungs. When the Roman guard saw that Jesus was dead, he pierced Jesus' side, and the pleural effusion flowed out, followed by the blood. This confirms Jesus' death. The Roman guards would not have let Jesus down any other way, because it was their lives in payment for his if Jesus somehow managed to live. There are 5 facts generally accepted about Jesus' death and resurrection. The first is that Jesus died by crucifixion. The second is that on the 3rd day the tomb was empty. The third is that the disciples confidently proclaimed seeing the risen Lord, even at pain of death. The third is Paul and James' conversion to the belief in the risen Lord. And the fifth is the rise of Christianity after just a few years. Only Christianity truly explains all 5 points. Now let's take a look at some of the other explanations. Let's start with mistaken identity. This is a popular view among the Muslims, and it says that it was not Jesus who actually died on the cross. However, this does not take into account the betrayal of Judas, the condemnation of the Jewish Sanhedrin, and the fact that there were women and disciples at Jesus' crucifixion. Somewhere along this line, somebody would have noticed if the man dying was not Jesus. Some people say that Jesus survived, but we've already looked at his death. And to say that Jesus survived crucifixion is the equivalency of saying Jesus survived a Nazi gas chamber. It doesn't happen. A very popular view is that somebody stole the body. However, this doesn't stand. The Jewish leaders originally claimed this, and then later changed their story, which shot their credibility. There were Roman guards posted at the entrance of the cave. How are a couple of Jewish boys supposed to overpower fully trained and fully armed Roman soldiers? And when the body first went missing, the disciples had as much clue as anybody else, which was none, until Jesus later appeared to them. Not only that, but even if somebody had stolen the body, this does not explain the conversion of Paul, who was killing Christians, and James, the half-brother of Jesus, who did not believe in Jesus until after his death and resurrection. Another explanation is that the disciples saw visions or hallucinations, or maybe they went to visit a medium. However, this does not touch the body at all. If the body still existed, you can guarantee that the Jewish Sanhedrin would have put the body on display to prove the claims false. And neither of these explanations are able to explain away the fact that there was 500 other accounts besides those of the disciples of seeing the risen Lord. Hallucinations and visions are agreed upon by psychologists to be single-person events. However, you have 500 people who have witnessed the same thing. And so that is obviously not a hallucination. And as far as visiting the medium goes, that doesn't even touch the other 500 appearances of Jesus to separate people. as you can see, these explanations are full of holes. Only Christianity covers it. Jesus was sent to die, and did die as payment for our messed upness in this world. God accepted the death because Jesus had lived a perfect and flawless life. To seal the transaction, God raised Jesus from the dead, and he raised him from the dead also to prove Jesus' claims. Jesus then appeared to his disciples and finished his training with them over a 40-day period. Later he appeared to Paul, the murderer of Christians, and James, his half-brother. Both men played key roles in the rise of Christianity, which flourished because of its spread of truth. However, if you want to make that Jesus cannot rise from the dead the corner of your worldview, I cannot stop you. But that is exactly what you will have to do if you want to keep Jesus dead. I have demonstrated to the best of my abilities how history supports Jesus as a Messiah. From the accuracy of the documentation and the uniqueness of Jesus' life to the confirmation of the messianic prophecies and the validity of the resurrection. Now I'm going to be completely honest. I understand how this works. You'll agree with me now. But the moment this is over, it won't matter to you. And by the time you've gone home to sleep tonight, you will have completely forgotten this, except in moments of passing thought. So if you remember nothing else, remember this. When you get sick and tired of your life, day in and day out, and who you are and what you become, then look to the man called Jesus, because he is the only person in all of history who will truly be able to make a difference. Thank you.